Have you ever felt the exact moment when someone you love stops looking at you as family and starts seeing you as a burden? I ask because there are moments in life that seem too small to be called destiny, yet big enough to change everything that comes after. And that day, in that exact minute, when the nursing home gate closed behind me, I knew the world had turned its back on my heart. The sound of that gate wasn't just metal hitting metal, it was the sound of a bond being pushed away. The sound of a daughter walking off with the heaviest footsteps a mother can ever hear. The sound of a goodbye I never chose. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your city, your state, your country. Because this story has no borders. It happens in so many homes, in so many places, in so many lives, carrying wounds hidden behind forced silence. I want to know where you are, because it matters to recognize that this story speaks to women and men from every corner, who've felt loneliness press on their chest in ways no one else could see. Write it so I know this truth is reaching people who have faced abandonments they never deserved. That nursing home had a smell that's hard to describe. Not bad, just a smell of time standing still, of memories stored away, of stories no one had the patience to hear. When the door closed, the sunlight slipped through the window as if trying to comfort me, but the light didn't reach the place where my heart was sitting. I held my purse with both hands, not because there was anything important inside it, but because it was the only thing I still knew belonged to me. It felt as if, from that moment on, everything I was had been left behind. I heard my daughter's footsteps moving away, and instantly my chest tightened, as if trying to keep that sound from becoming the last I would ever hear from her. Her steps faded down the hallway, and each one felt like it ripped another piece out of my story. A mother is never prepared to be left behind. Never. No matter how hard life is, no matter how cruel time becomes, there is a part of us that always believes a mother-child bond is strong enough to survive any storm. But what I lived that day showed me something painful. Love holds on until the moment the other person decides not to fight anymore. I remember the light entering through the window, drawing golden lines across the floor, as if the world itself were trying to hold on to what was happening. The room where they left me had old furniture, tired beige walls, and a silence that seemed to look at me with pity. And for the first time in many years, I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if I had lost my identity the moment her steps disappeared. The silence inside that nursing home wasn't like the silence at home. It wasn't rest, it wasn't pause, it wasn't peace. It was a silence that spoke to me, that pushed me into a reality I didn't want to accept. A silence that said, "You were left here." I looked at the door that had just closed, and for a moment I waited for her to come back. I waited for regret. I waited for her heart to speak louder than the excuses she carried. But the door stayed exactly as it was, shut. And right there, in that very first moment of abandonment, I realized I was about to live a story no mother's heart should ever have to know. It didn't matter how old I was. It didn't matter how many battles I had already fought. Right there, I understood that the deepest pain doesn't come from life. It comes from the ones we raise. The nurses walked past me with quiet steps, tending to the other women who lived there, and I tried to blend into that environment as if it were easy, as if it were natural, as if it were my choice. But inside, I was shattered. The feeling of being left in a nursing home is something impossible to fully explain. It has no comparison. It's not like losing a job. It's not like ending a relationship. It's not like facing financial hardship. The abandonment of a child hurts in a way that cuts through every layer of the soul. It wounds the places no one sees, no one touches, no one can reach except God. I looked at the walls and tried to understand where everything had changed, how an entire life dedicated to loving someone could end in a chair inside a nursing home, how so many years of care, of sacrifice, of silent giving could end in a room with a simple bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking a garden where women with similar stories walked slowly. I wondered if my daughter would ever feel the emptiness I felt then. Not out of revenge, but because only those who go through this understand the hole it opens inside us. As I walked through the hallways, trying to adapt to a place I never imagined calling home, I realized that silence had a voice. It spoke to me in a way no one else could hear. It told me I was stepping into a chapter I never chose to write, but one that would reveal truths I never wanted to face. And in that moment, When the echo of my daughter's footsteps disappeared completely, I understood the sentence that echoed inside me as if carved on the walls. I didn't know that abandonment would become the hardest lesson of her life, and that sentence, simple as it sounds, carried a weight I would only understand much later. It felt as if life were quietly setting the stage for a future moment, waiting for the exact hour to reveal what was coming. Because some pains aren't punishments, they're pathways. And there, sitting on a worn-out armchair, my trembling hands gripping the fabric, I felt that my heart was about to walk through a journey that would change not only my story, but my daughter's as well. The pain I felt in that moment was real, deep, sharp, but it wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning of a revelation neither of us was ready for, one that life, in its hard wisdom, would insist on teaching. When I close my eyes and go back in time, before a nursing home door ever became my fate, I can still see the little girl who once filled my life in ways no one else ever could. She was born on an ordinary day, but nothing about that moment was ordinary. I remember her first cry, her first touch, the indescribable feeling of holding someone who depended on me for everything. That moment marked not only the start of her life, it marked the rebirth of mine. Motherhood does that to us. It shifts priorities, shifts paths, shifts the way the heart beats. And because of her, I learned early on that a mother's love isn't just about feeling. It's about sacrificing, fighting, enduring, staying on your feet when your body wants to collapse and your soul wants to give up. She grew up in a simple home, but one overflowing with affection. There was no luxury, but there was presence. There was care, protection, devotion. I remember the sleepless nights, her feverish in my arms, me awake while the whole world rested, whispering quiet prayers only mothers understand. And when the sun rose, no one knew what I had battled during those hours. Because the love we give our children is rarely seen, but always felt. She grew up seeing my calloused hands, but never knew the price they paid. The price of giving up rest, food, emotional peace. I worked extra hours, took jobs others refused, carried days of pain I kept hidden so that little girl could grow without the weight I carried. I gave up the best piece of food, the new clothes, the moments of leisure I never had time to live, all because she was my reason, my future, my hope. And for many years, she was also my pride. I remember her first day of school. She held my hand so tightly it felt like she was afraid the world might swallow her whole. I knelt down, looked into her eyes, and told her everything would be all right. And she believed me, because in childhood, a mother is the safe harbor, the compass, the ground beneath their feet. And that day, she walked into the classroom and looked back at me through the window with that shy little smile of someone who trusts without hesitation. That look stayed with me for years. It was the look of someone who knew she could always come home and find me waiting to hold her. Once, when she was about 9, she came home crying because a girl at school had made fun of her hair. I sat her on my lap and told her that her hair was the most beautiful crown God could have placed on anyone, that nothing in this world is more powerful than a black girl learning to love every part of who she is. And that day, I saw her confidence light up right in front of me. I was a mother and a shield, a mother and a mirror, a mother and the ground she walked on. Comment, I lived this with my mother, if this part touched your heart. On the hard days when money wouldn't stretch far enough, I invented miracles. I made meals out of whatever I had, turned scraps into dinner, created stories just so she wouldn't notice that something was missing. Because for me, going without was never the problem. The real problem would have been her going without. And even if she didn't notice back then, my body carries the marks of every time I tried to be the sunlight on the cloudiest days of our lives. When she became a teenager, I noticed the changes. Natural changes, expected changes, the kind that come with growing up. But even then, my love adjusted, transformed, renewed itself. I tried to stay close without crossing lines, tried to guide without suffocating, tried to teach without wounding. It was the season where I made the most mistakes, trying to get everything right. And even so, everything I did was for her future. I told her she needed to study, to build her own life, to protect herself from people who might try to take advantage of her. But like every teenager, she thought I was being dramatic, overprotective, too worried, and maybe I was. But a mother's love is made of exaggerations, made of fears, made of instincts we can't always explain. I remember the day she walked through the door and showed me her very first paycheck. She smiled so wide that my pride spilled right out of my eyes. She hugged me tight and said she wanted to give me the world, and I laughed because I never expected anything from her. I just wanted her to be happy. But today, looking back, I wonder where that tenderness went. At what moment did that little girl with big dreams start seeing her own mother as a burden? Comment, this happens more than it should to strengthen this theme. We faced many battles together. I fought against overdue bills, against closed doors, against unfairness, against the exhaustion that settles into the soul. And she saw it all. She saw me crying quietly, thinking she was asleep. She saw me coming home late, worn out, yet still cooking dinner so she'd have something warm to eat. She saw me defending her from cruel people, saw me lifting my head after defeats, saw how hard I tried to be, not just a mother, but a role model. And that's exactly what makes abandonment so deep. Because when a mother has a story, has sacrifice, has devotion, has real love, the pain doesn't come only from the moment she's left behind. The pain comes from the contrast, the before and the after, the everything that was given and the nothing that remained. The pain comes from the imbalance between what we poured out and what life gave back. I think about every birthday I organized, even without money. Every night I stayed awake because she was sick. Every piece of advice I gave, trying to protect her from things I had already lived through. I think about how hard I tried to give her opportunities I never had. And it's impossible not to relive all of that when I'm sitting in a nursing home chair, forgotten by the same daughter who once promised to take care of me when I grew old. But it didn't happen overnight. The fall is never sudden. It starts in the details, in the small distances, in the subtle shifts the heart notices long before the mind is ready to accept them. And I felt that distance growing, even when I tried to pretend it wasn't. That gentle drift that slowly becomes silence. That silence that becomes absence. The absence that becomes indifference. And by the time we notice, we're already being pushed out of the place we were supposed to belong. I didn't know she was walking toward the day she would leave me in a nursing home. I didn't know her transformation would lead down such a hard road. I didn't know life was preparing a lesson no one wants, but some people end up needing to learn. And that's why this story must be told with truth, courage, and depth, because many people need to understand that abandonment doesn't start on the day it happens. It begins way back, in the tiny fractures no one notices, and that's how everything started to shift, even before I understood it would. That's how the bond faded, how love was erased by the priorities she chose, by the influences she embraced, by the decisions she made without remembering the one who had been by her side all her life. That's how the fall began, slowly, quietly. And that's exactly where this story continues, because what happened next was even deeper, even more revealing, even more painful than anything I could have imagined. Her change didn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It came the way all silent breaker transformations arrive, slowly, almost unnoticed, like someone pulling a rug inch by inch until one day, you fall without understanding when you lost your balance. At first, it was just small delays. Days when she came home later, saying she had errands to run. Afternoons when she preferred to stay in her room instead of sitting with me in the living room. I tried to believe it was just a phase, just youth, just the fast-paced world pulling her away. But there was something in the way she looked at me that didn't match the love that once lived in her eyes. The daughter who once hugged me without hurry now seemed to rush even through her embraces. A quick touch, almost forced, almost uncomfortable, like someone trying to keep their distance without seeming cold. And I, as a mother, tried to start conversations, tried to stay close, tried to understand what was happening, but every attempt pushed her even farther away. There were no fights, no shouting, no dramatic arguments, just a constant drift, cold, quiet, stretched out over time. A distance that hurts more than harsh words, because it's absence that wounds when it comes from someone who used to be presence. Around that time, she met that young man. He came into her life the way certain influences slip through the door without knocking. At first, he seemed polite, brought gifts, smiled at me, asked questions as if he wanted to build a connection. but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me. Not open malice, a subtle shadow. A shadow of someone who saw a mother not as part of his girlfriend's life, but as an obstacle. I could tell, even if no one else saw it, that he wanted to shape her. Not to make her better, but to control her. And when a woman lets someone like that in, she starts believing she needs to distance herself from everyone who reminds her of who she used to be. Comment: I've seen this happen if you've ever watched someone change because of another person. They started dating, and from then on, distance became routine. I was no longer consulted about anything, no longer invited into conversations, no longer part of her plans. When I tried to warn her, when I tried to open her eyes to certain things I noticed, she got irritated, saying I was exaggerating, that I wanted to control her life, that I couldn't handle the fact she was growing up. That hurt. Not because she disagreed with me, but because she didn't see that my caution wasn't control. It was love from someone who had lived enough to recognize dangerous winds, even when they still felt like a breeze. The phone calls, that used to be daily, started to spread out. Before, she told me every detail of her day, every victory, every frustration. Now, the phone only rang when she needed something. And when I answered, her tone was distant, rushed, as if talking to me was an obligation. I heard her voice, but I no longer felt the daughter I had raised. I felt only someone performing a duty she no longer cared to have. The visits began fading, too. First, she skipped a week, then 2, and soon it became normal for her to go more than a month without stepping into my home. When she did show up, she looked tired, but it wasn't the tiredness of work. It was the tiredness of affection, the exhaustion of pretending everything was fine while, inside her, something was running away from me as fast as it could. And I noticed. Mothers notice even what children try to hide. I tried to reach her with light conversations, with the food she loved, with memories that used to bring us closer, but it felt like every gesture I made became a reason for her to feel annoyed. I asked, "How are you?" And she'd say, "Mom, you ask too many questions." I said, "I missed you." And she'd answer, "I'm busy." I offered help, and she said she didn't need it. I offered affection, and she pretended not to see. And that's when the first humiliations began, the subtle ones, the kind that hurt more because they're too delicate to confront. A raised eyebrow when I said something simple, a little laugh when I showed concern, a short comment hinting that I was outdated, that my opinions belonged to another time, that I didn't understand today's world. The daughter who once called me her inspiration now seemed embarrassed by me. Comment: "This breaks my heart if this part spoke to you." I watched her pulling away the way you watch a door slowly closing. Every inch seemed small, but before I realized it, the door barely had space left for me to enter. And worst of all, I tried to justify everything inside my own heart so it wouldn't hurt as much. I told myself she was just too busy, too tired, too involved with work, with her relationship, with her own life. But deep down, in the place where mothers keep their truths, I knew it wasn't that. I knew something deeper, more serious, more dangerous was happening inside her. She started to look at me the way someone looks at a past they want to forget, as if I were a reminder of everything she no longer wanted to be. And that pain is hard to explain, because it isn't just rejection. It's the feeling that your own story is being discarded because someone decided they wanted a life that no longer matched the love they once received. When she got married, I felt the distance stretch even further. Marriage could have brought us closer, could have built new bonds, could have been the beginning of something beautiful. But it wasn't. She became so absorbed in the world she was building with that man that I had to learn to live with absence the same way you learn to live. With an open wound, with care, with silence, with hidden tears. I heard news about her not from her, but from other people. People who spoke without realizing that every detail reaching my ears was a reminder that my presence was no longer a priority. She built an entire life without including me, and when I finally understood that, I felt a cold wind slip through the cracks time had opened between us. Pride started living in her eyes. Not healthy pride, the kind that builds walls instead of bridges, that separates instead of connects, that stiffens instead of welcomes. She started believing that I held her back, that I was in the way, that I represented her past instead of her support. And that belief, fed by the influences she chose, planted inside her the seed of the final separation. And the truth is, every gesture she made during that time was already a rehearsal for what would come next. The abandonment wasn't a surprise. It was a consequence. It was the result of a slow accumulation I watched happen without being able to stop it. And as painful as that reality was, it needed to be faced, because no one wakes up one morning and suddenly decides to leave their mother in a nursing home. That decision begins long before. It's born in delayed answers, in neglect, in broken promises, in presences that turn into absences. And it was exactly during that period that my heart began to sense something big, something deep, something devastating approaching. The daughter, who once depended on me to live, was now walking down a road where I no longer fit. And that growing distance was the first warning of the storm that was coming. The day she decided to leave me in the nursing home didn't start differently from any other. There was no warning, no argument, no storm. Sometimes life disguises its worst moments as ordinary ones, as if fate enjoys dressing tragedy in normal clothes. I woke up early, made my coffee, straightened up the house as usual, without imagining that it would be the last day I'd see that living room as mine. The daughter I had raised with so much love walked in with an expression I no longer recognized. Eyes too firm, too closed, too decided. Eyes that don't open doors, only close them. She walked in, and the silence that followed already said everything. I felt it. A mother's body feels before the mind understands. She didn't say good morning, didn't ask how I was, didn't hug me. She just took a deep breath, the kind someone takes when they need courage to deliver a sentence. And I, without understanding yet, felt my soul preparing for impact. She sat at the kitchen table, looked at me with the eyes that once sought protection and now sought distance, and said the words that still echo inside me as if they were carved into my chest. Mom, you can't live alone anymore. I found a place for you to stay. I still remember the sound of my breath catching, not because of the nursing home itself, but because I knew that decision wasn't made out of care. It was made out of convenience, out of relief, because I no longer fit in her life. I tried to stay calm, because a mother tries to stay calm even when she's collapsing inside. I asked where it was, why, when she had decided this, but she looked away from me like someone fully aware they were doing something hurtful, but pretending not to notice. I said I didn't need it. She insisted I did. I said I could still take care of myself. She said I couldn't anymore. I tried to explain, tried to show her I was still capable, still strong, still able to live in my own home. But the truth is, she wasn't there to discuss anything. She was there to announce a decision. She had already made up her mind. The sentence was ready. The plan was done. And I, who had always been the protagonist of my own life, was now being treated like a background character in hers. Comment, this hurts deeply if this part touched your heart. I stared at her, trying to find in her face some trace of the little girl who once called me her safe harbor. But all I found was hurry, a cold hurry, an impatience disguised as responsibility. I told her it was too sudden, that I needed time, that I needed to understand. But she cut me off like someone silencing a truth they don't want to hear. Mom, there's no discussion. It's already settled. Those words hurt more than she'll ever understand. The car arrived a few hours later. I still remember the sound of the door closing, the driver calling my name, the small bag she packed in a rush, stuffing inside only the essentials, as if the essentials could ever replace an entire life built inside those walls. Every object she chose to leave behind carried a story, a memory, a piece of my heart. But she didn't see it. Or maybe she didn't want to. The drive to the nursing home felt longer than it really was. I looked out the car window and tried to hold on to every corner of the city, as if those memories could stop what was coming. My home, my street, my routines, my footsteps, my scent, everything was being left behind without giving me a chance to fight. The daughter who once promised she would take care of me when I grew old was now taking me to a place where she wouldn't have to carry the weight of my existence anymore. When we arrived, the nursing home looked too quiet. It wasn't welcoming. It wasn't cruel. It was simply the kind of place that carries stories of abandonment as naturally as if it had witnessed hundreds of them. She parked, got out first, and asked me to wait a moment. And I waited, because mothers wait. Mothers always wait, even when they know waiting won't change anything. When I stepped out of the car, the wind hit my face as if life itself were warning me that I was about to enter a chapter I never imagined living. She walked ahead of me, not beside me. She didn't offer her arm. She didn't offer support, and that alone said more than any words could. The hallway was long, with wide windows letting in. Beautiful light, but not every light reaches the dark places inside us. We entered the room where they would check me in. The receptionist smiled, but I couldn't smile back. My daughter handed over my documents, the way someone returns a borrowed object. I looked at her, trying to understand what had happened to the love we once built together, and she, avoiding my eyes, stared at her phone as if handling problems far more urgent than my broken heart. When everything was finalized, the staff member said they would take me to my room. Did she hug me? No. Did she thank me for everything I had done? No. Did she apologize? Not even close. She simply took a deep breath, placed her hand on my shoulder, and said, "You'll be fine." And in that cold touch, I felt the confirmation that she wasn't leaving me there because she couldn't take care of me, but because she didn't want to. Comment, she turned her back, if this moment hit you. Her final look before she left was the part that hurt the most, because she didn't look at me like a daughter. She looked at me like someone checking off a responsibility, like someone relieved to remove a weight, like someone ending a chapter that her heart had closed long before her mouth admitted it. Her silence said more than any sentence ever could. She turned her back and walked out, just like that, as if leaving a meeting, as if it were just another task on her list. The sound of her footsteps walking away echoed in my chest, the same way it had the day her car pulled away from the curb in front of my house. A sound that slices, that rips, that travels through the soul without mercy. I stood there, watching the door close behind her, and something inside me shattered in a way that even time can't fully repair. No matter how many years pass, there are wounds that leave no scar on the outside, but stay forever open on the inside. The staff member called my name and asked me to follow him. I walked slowly, as someone carrying the weight of an entire life on their shoulders. And as I walked, I realized the pain I felt made no noise. It was a silent pain, the kind that destroys pieces of the soul no one sees. A pain that doesn't come from life itself, but from someone you raised with every bit of love you had. A pain that shouldn't exist, but does, and one I would have to learn how to carry, even without knowing how. When they took me to the room where I would stay, the air changed in a way I can't explain. There was a large window with an old wooden frame letting in soft light. The bed was narrow, the walls worn by time, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with lavender seemed like an attempt to disguise the loneliness living there. I looked at that space the way someone looks at a life they never chose. It wasn't my home, it wasn't my place. It was just somewhere I would have to learn to exist while the world kept moving without me. The other women appeared little by little, each one carrying a story behind their eyes, their steps, their silence. Some talked too much, filling the emptiness with words. Some barely lifted their heads, as if they had forgotten how to expect visitors. Some smiled out of politeness. Others cried quietly in the bathrooms. And there were those like me, women carrying the feeling of being left, not because they needed to be, but because they were inconvenient. I spent the first days observing. Every corner of the nursing home seemed marked by a story of abandonment. The woman in the bed next to mine told me she had 2 children, but neither had visited in months. She said it with a strange calmness, as if she had accepted being forgotten as part of her routine. Down the hall, another woman prayed every day that her grandson would remember her, even if only with a message. And in the corridor, an elderly woman walked slowly with her walker, whispering her late husband's name as if that was the only way to keep from losing herself completely. Comment, I feel this. Loneliness, if this part moved you. The routine was always the same. Early breakfast, medication, small conversations, the TV playing for women who had stopped talking altogether. The nurses tried to be kind, but professional kindness doesn't replace the love someone needs. And even though I tried to adapt, I could still taste the bitterness of abandonment in every glass of water I drank, in every meal I ate, sitting at a table full of women whose eyes begged for someone who never came. The first week passed, and I started to notice everyone there had an internal clock, Not one that tracks time, but one that tracks hope. After lunch, many of them got ready. Perfume, hairbrushed, their nicest blouse, even if they only had a few. All because they believed someone would show up that day. Their hope was so sincere, it hurt to watch. Some would sit in the reception area for hours, staring at the door like someone waiting for salvation. Some were called by name when their families arrived. And, in that moment, I could see a childlike glow returning to their faces, like life being poured back into them for a brief second. But others waited silently until exhaustion or disappointment finally won. I wondered in those first days if I would become one of the ones who waited, and the answer came too quickly. On Sunday, the day when visits are most common, I sat near the front door, pretending I was just resting. But deep down, I was waiting for my daughter to walk in. I still believed her heart would soften, that she would feel my absence, that maybe all of this had been a moment of impulse. And as the hours passed, and the door opened for mothers, fathers, grandparents, but never for me, I felt a piece of my soul fall in a slow, devastating way. I stayed in that chair until a nurse walked over and asked if I wanted dinner. I looked at her, not with anger, not with desperation, but with a sorrow so deep that I didn't even need to answer. She understood, and she walked me to the dining room slowly, respecting my silence, because sometimes silence is the only way the soul can avoid collapsing in front of witnesses. The days that followed were the same. I woke up, waited, smiled to hide the truth, waited a little more, and when the door didn't open for me, I tucked that truth inside my chest, a truth that was heavy, but one I tried to carry with dignity. Because inside a nursing home, pain is never a surprise. Pain is routine. Pain is normalized. Pain becomes part of the identity of those who were forgotten. I started paying attention to a woman named Almerinda, who kept saying her son had promised to visit her the following week. She said that every week, and every week it was a lie. But she believed it, truly believed it, because believing was the only way she knew how to keep breathing. And watching those stories repeat themselves right in front of me, I finally understood something. Loneliness has a sound. It isn't silence. It's the echo of everything that was never said, everything that was promised but never kept, everything that should have arrived but got lost along the way. Comment: it's not easy to wait if this part touched you. Sometimes, while walking down those hallways, I found myself remembering my home, the smell of fresh coffee, the soft hum of the old radio playing in the background. The rug she always said was tacky, but I loved because it held part of my story. I remembered my favorite plant by the window, the pots and pans I worked so hard to buy, every corner that carried a piece of my identity, and realizing that all of that had been left behind because of a decision made by the person I loved the most was a wound I was still learning to endure. But inside that deep loneliness, something started to shift within me. It didn't happen overnight. It came like a thin ray of light slipping through the smallest crack, a slow, silent, steady movement. I began to understand that if I stayed trapped in that pain, it would suffocate me. I needed to breathe, even inside a place I never chose. I needed to find strength, because strength is the only inheritance no one can take from us. I needed to remember what I still had, not just what had been ripped away. And as I walked that tight path between hurt and resilience, my story began taking a different shape. Because inside that nursing home, I discovered something no one had ever told me. When loneliness tries to destroy you, the soul learns to survive with whatever remains. And sometimes, what remains is enough to begin a journey life still intends to reveal. The days inside that place moved slowly, as if time had learned to drag its feet, and I was already beginning to understand that loneliness, cruel as it is, teaches far more than any company ever could. And while I was living that quiet process, discovering strength where only wounds once lived, life on the outside was moving its invisible strings. Because nothing goes unaccounted for, no matter how it appears. Nothing is forgotten in the heart of destiny. Everything planted eventually finds its way back to the one who sowed it. I knew nothing of what was happening at first. I had no idea what was unfolding in my daughter's life. But the life she once flaunted as stable, spotless, enviable, began to fracture. First in small ways, almost impossible to notice, but heavy enough to carry the weight of everything she threw out into the universe the day she abandoned me. It's incredible how life gives back exactly what you plant. Comment, life always collects, if this part makes sense to you. My daughter was always practical, fast-paced, too rushed to listen to advice. Her marriage, which in the beginning seemed so solid, so admirable from the outside, began cracking at the edges. First came the small arguments, those little clashes disguised as bad moods but carrying truths no one wants to face. Then the arguments became routine, and in a home where no one speaks from the heart, every small issue becomes a storm. Her husband, once affectionate and attentive, started pulling away. He blamed work, but emotional distance doesn't need an excuse. He came home late, avoided conversations, avoided touch, avoided even looking her in the eyes. And my daughter, who always needed to feel in control of everything, didn't know how to handle it. Her pride, the same pride that led her to leave me in that nursing home, became her worst enemy. Instead of seeking help, she searched for someone to blame. And in her mind, I was still one of them, even far away, even silent, even without a voice. The house she lived in, once full of laughter, now felt heavy, drained, colorless, as if the energy had been leaking out little by little. Her husband started sleeping in another room. Because of stress, he said. But anyone who knows emotional pain knows that distance rarely has just one cause. He no longer saw in her the woman he once admired, and she no longer saw in him the man he once promised to be. The truth is, when the heart loses humility, love loses its path. Comment, that's true if that line spoke to you. As the marriage crumbled, her financial life also began to collapse. The business she believed in so fiercely, the investment she claimed would secure the family's future, fell apart. She partnered with people who made promises of profit, stability, growth. But promises without roots become debt. And the debts came. They came like a rising tide, demanding everything at once. She tried to hide it, tried to manage it, tried to keep the appearance of a woman in full control. But life is wise. When it wants to teach, it pulls off the mask. Bills piled up, credit cards maxed out. Her husband refused to join decisions, and with every attempt to solve things on her own, she sank deeper. Her pride didn't allow her to ask for help. Not from me, not from anyone. Because admitting weakness, for her, meant admitting defeat. And people who live for appearances cannot bear the bitter taste of truth. But the hardest blow was still coming. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, as I was told later. She got home early, smelled a perfume that wasn't hers, saw rumpled clothes tossed over a chair, and understood exactly what was happening without needing any explanation. The betrayal didn't come as a surprise. It came as confirmation. She already knew she had been losing him for months. She just didn't want to say it out loud. And when she confronted him, shaking, with rage and desperation, he didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't even try to explain. He simply said, "We don't work anymore." And that sentence, so simple, so cold, so similar to the look she gave me the day she left me at the nursing home, became the mirror she never wanted to face. Because life gives back the words. Life gives back the gestures. Life returns exactly what you put into the world. And in that moment, when she heard those words, my abandonment finally found its echo. Inside her chest, she felt what it was like to be left, and there was no one there to hold her. She spiraled into emotional pain that grew like a shadow. She began losing weight, crying in secret, living on sleepless nights. Her job demanded performance, but she could no longer hold up the facade. A woman who spends her whole life running from her own soul will eventually be caught by truth. Her friends drifted away, some because they didn't want to deal with her sadness, others because they were tired of the complaints and drama, others because they were never real friends in the first place. And when she realized she was alone, truly alone, there came a moment when her arrogance finally began to break. She tried to visit the nursing home once, but didn't have the courage to come inside. According to the staff member who told me, she stood outside, gripping her purse tightly, breathing like someone carrying a stone on their chest. But she didn't enter. Her pride was still stronger than her pain. And I, inside, unaware of any of this, continued living my quiet days. Until one day, life decided to close a cycle in the harshest way possible. She fell emotionally ill, not a physical illness, but that silent sickness that begins in the mind and leaks into the soul, a deep sadness, an exhaustion that didn't come from the body but from existence itself, an emptiness that steals meaning from everything. She started missing work, avoiding people, living in the dark corners of her own home as if she'd lost the sun inside her. Her world was collapsing, and no one offered the hand she once pulled away from me when I needed it most. Comment: life goes full circle, if this part reached you. And while all of this unfolded, her marriage destroyed, the betrayal laid bare, her finances falling apart, her emotional health shredded by the weight of her own choices, the one image that kept coming back to her, over and over again, was the moment she closed the nursing home gate behind me. She told me that later. She said that for days and nights, that scene replayed like a movie she couldn't turn off. She said she tried to convince herself she did the right thing, but with every blow life landed on her, something whispered back, "Now you understand." Because abandonment, when it returns multiplied. And right there, on the edge of her emotional collapse, something began to shift inside her. It wasn't regret yet. It was only the beginning, the first crack, the first loose thread of pride being pulled by destiny, the first fracture in the wall she had built herself. And while she lived through her own unraveling, while life taught her its harshest lesson, I remained in the nursing home, unaware that the spiritual turning point of our story was just beginning, and that all this pain was only the prelude to a reunion that would change everything. In the days that followed my daughter's fall, something started to move inside her like a line of light, trying to break through a thick wall. Life had pushed her into a corner where pride could no longer protect her, where the masks she always wore began to crack, where the strength she thought she had wasn't enough to hold back the storm she had invited into her own life. And when life does that, when it pushes us back into ourselves, there is no running from memories, no escaping what the heart already knows, no silencing what the soul has been trying to say for years. It was in that space between collapse and silence that my daughter began remembering me. At first, the memories came quickly, almost involuntarily, like flashes appearing in the middle of the night when she tried and failed to sleep. But slowly, those memories gained weight, and these were the images that kept returning to her mind. Me holding her hand when she was afraid of the dark, me tucking in her sheets at night, me bringing her hot soup when she got sick, me wringing clothes in the sink with tired arms, me sleeping upright on a chair just so she could have a comfortable pillow. She remembered the woman who stayed even when the world didn't. She remembered the mother who never turned her back, even when everything was against us. That's how life works. It pulls truths back to the surface with the same force it pushes them away. And my daughter, for the first time in many years, began to see her own story differently. Not the proud version she chose to believe, but the real one, the deep one, the one that wounds and heals at the same time. She remembered the nights when I went without food, so she wouldn't go to school hungry. She remembered the dreams I tucked away, so she could have the right to dream her own. She remembered that the distance didn't come from lack of love, but from lack of recognition. She remembered that I wasn't perfect, but I was present. And presence, when missing, hurts in a way no absence can replace. Comment: memory demands payment if you understand this kind of pain. Her house, now empty, echoed with the memories she tried to bury. Each room held a ghost of me. The kitchen carried the scent of my cooking. The living room carried the sound of my voice telling her to rest. The bedroom carried the warmth of my care. Even the bathroom reminded her of the times I knocked on the door to hand her the towel she forgot. The home she thought was hers alone reminded her that, in truth, it had always been built with my hands, my touch, my sacrifices. And that realization struck a nerve she had never dared acknowledge. Without me, everything felt shapeless. She tried to keep moving, tried to force herself into a routine, tried to stay busy so she wouldn't have to confront the truth. But truth doesn't knock. Truth breaks the door open. And on a cold night, as she sat on the edge of her bed, she felt an ache so sharp, it felt like a knife to the chest. It wasn't longing, it was regret. And regret, when born in someone who once thought they knew everything, hurts even deeper. It hurts the soul, it hurts the body, it hurts the pride, because regret reveals the lies we told ourselves. She began to cry, not the quiet tears she used as armor, but a deep, guttural sob that stole her breath. And as she cried, soaking the pillow, feeling her soul beg for help, one phrase echoed inside her, a phrase she once said to me the day she left me at the nursing home. "I'm doing this for your own good." The cruel irony was that now she longed to hear, "I'm here for you," but no one was there to say it. Because those who turn life into an emotional desert don't find shade when the sun burns. The emptiness she created began crushing her. The days felt too long, the nights endless, the silence unbearably loud. And in that silence, my daughter realized she had no one to call when her heart hurt. No one to sit with her at the table. No one to ask if she had eaten. No one to notice the hidden exhaustion, the distant stare, the fear she pretended she didn't feel. It was in that silence she understood. I was the only person in the world who had never loved her out of convenience. I was the only person who gave without expecting anything. I was the only person who would have stayed. But she left me before she ever gave me the chance to stay. Comment, I've felt that, if this part spoke to you. The days started blending together, and for the first time in her life, my daughter began thinking with humility. Not by choice, but because she had no other option. Her pride meant nothing now. It solved nothing, comforted nothing, supported nothing. Pride, which had always been her shield, had become her prison. And while she faced her emotional downfall, her reflection in the mirror began to change. The dark circles grew deeper. Her lips lost color. Her expression no longer carried that arrogant hardness. It carried guilt, real guilt, heavy guilt, guilt that hurts more than any physical illness. That was when she realized her life was spiraling toward rock bottom, and a specific image started appearing every time she closed her eyes. Me, sitting on the nursing home bed, holding my own hands, trying to look strong on the outside while holding myself together on the inside. She imagined my loneliness. She imagined my silence. She imagined the cold of my absence and the absence of my warmth. And the more she imagined, the more her pain turned into awareness. My daughter finally understood what she had done. And when the truth appears, it never comes alone. It comes with questions that cut the soul open. My daughter spent night after night wondering if I was still alive, if I was okay, if I had fallen ill, if I had anyone to talk to, if I missed her. Panic consumed her like waves crashing against stone. She thought, what if my mother dies in there and I don't know? The guilt began burning like an open wound, and she could no longer ignore it. She wanted to see me. She wanted to run to the nursing home. She wanted to beg for forgiveness, but she couldn't take the first step. She was afraid of looking me in the eyes and seeing her mistake reflected back at her, afraid of hearing the one word that hurt her the most. No, afraid of not being forgiven, afraid she had crossed a line, afraid she had come too late. Her regret became a weight on her back, on her chest, on her soul. She carried shame the way someone carries a heavy, soaked wool coat, suffocating, heavy, impossible to ignore. Comment, shame weighs heavy if this part reached you. And then, on a cloudy morning, waking up with her face swollen from crying all night, my daughter finally made the decision she had been avoiding for months. She got out of bed with trembling hands, threw on whatever clothes she could find, twisted her hair into a messy bun, and left the house without looking back. It wasn't courage. It was necessity. It was desperation. It was love that arrived late, but arrived still. When she reached the street where the nursing home was, her legs nearly gave out. She stood on the sidewalk, taking in the smell of the trees, hearing the distant noise of passing cars, trying to gather enough strength to cross that gate. Life had given her enough falls for her to finally understand that this moment wasn't optional. It was destiny. It was balance. It was harvest. It was emotional justice. And as she walked closer to the gate, her heart thumping so loud it felt like it wanted to break free from her chest, she whispered softly, as if speaking to God, to fate, to the memory of who she used to be, "I just want my mother back." Her voice came out broken, hoarse, soaked in all the regret she had been carrying. And then, finally, she placed her hand on the nursing home gate handle, and right there, in that second, in that pause between fear and reunion, Life placed my daughter face to face with her greatest revelation. She only understood a mother's worth when life stripped away everything superficial and left her with only what truly mattered. And it was exactly there, in that first step toward the past she tried to bury, that our story began to take a new path. When my daughter grabbed that gate handle, her world seemed to freeze. The wind moved slowly, almost as if respecting the pain she carried in her chest. Her hands shook, not from the morning chill, but from the weight of shame. Her breathing was short, unsteady, as if she were about to step into a courtroom where she already knew the sentence. But still, even with all the fear, even with her heart pounding in despair, she knew she couldn't go back, because turning back now would mean running away from herself, and she had been running for far too long. When the gate finally opened, the sound it made, that rough, old, memory-soaked creak, echoed inside her soul. It was as if destiny itself were announcing that nothing would ever be the same again. She stepped inside slowly, each step as heavy as if she were walking on her own conscience. That place, which she once confronted with indifference, now felt almost sacred. It was there she left me. It was there she hurt me. It was there she lost something she was only now realizing could never be replaced. Comment: reunion hurts before it heals, if this part touched you. The nurses looked at her with surprise. Some recognized her. Others simply noticed the desperation written all over her face. She tried to smile, but the smile died before it formed. She tried to breathe deeply, but her breath escaped as a sob. It was clear she wasn't there for an ordinary visit. She was there to face her truth. She was there to pick up the pieces of herself she had scattered the day she abandoned me. When she asked for me, her voice came out shaky, almost childlike. The employee pointed toward the hallway on the left, and in that moment her heart nearly collapsed. The hallway felt longer than it really was. It felt endless. Every door she passed reminded her of a different guilt. Every elderly woman sitting in the garden, every empty gaze, every wheelchair waiting in silence whispered what she had done to me. She started walking slowly, and with each step, a tear was born. Not a quick tear, the kind that slides down and dries. These were heavy tears, tears soaked in regret, loss, downfall, darkness, tears carrying the bitter feeling of having woken up too late. And when she finally saw me, sitting with my hands folded in my lap, gently adjusting a corner of the blanket over my knees, she stopped completely. Her body froze, her breath caught, her shoulders collapsed. It was as if she were standing in front of an emotional mirror, seeing not just the mother she abandoned, but the woman she herself had become. I, sitting there, had no idea what was about to happen. My mind was drifting through simple thoughts, patched memories of the past, recollections of a time when my daughter ran barefoot through the house. Life inside the nursing home had taught me to live with her absence, even if that absence always remained an open wound. But when I sensed movement in the hallway, when I heard footsteps that weren't from the nurses, when I felt the air around me shift, I lifted my head, and there she was, my daughter, the little girl I once carried in my arms, the little girl I rocked through feverish nights, the little girl whose hand I held as she learned to walk, to read, to live, the girl who became a woman, yet at that moment looked smaller than she ever had. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her face transformed into a silent confession. Her eyes, red and full of tears, begged for something she didn't know how to ask for. And before any word was spoken, my soul understood exactly what was happening. She had come back broken, back shattered, back remorseful, back real. Comment: she came back to carry this story forward. She took a step, then another, and another. Her shoes hit the floor with the weight of 100 lifetimes. And then, when she was just a few feet away from me, her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees on the cold hallway floor. Her hand covered her mouth, trying to hold in the sobs that no longer fit inside her. Her whole body trembled. Her whole soul pleaded. And when she finally found the strength to speak, her voice came out fractured. "Mom, forgive me." The sound of that word pierced my chest like lightning, not because I wanted or needed to hear it, but because I understood the depth of her fall. I understood the pain life had used to teach her. I understood she wasn't there out of obligation, but out of transformation. My daughter had reached the point where pride dies and truth is born. I took a deep breath. My hand trembled slightly. But my heart stood firm. Not firm from hardness, but from love, from faith, from something only a mother understands. I didn't want revenge. I never did. I didn't want to see my daughter suffer. I didn't want life to punish her. I only wanted my daughter back. So I stood up slowly. I approached her, and when I was close enough to feel the warmth of her tears falling to the floor, I placed my hand on her head. She lifted her face, desperate, bracing for a rejection that would have destroyed her. But rejection would never be part of my story. It would never be part of my soul. I lowered myself. I touched her face gently, the way you touch something too fragile for any kind of haste. And then, with a voice that carried my entire journey, my entire pain, my entire emotional maturity, I spoke the sentence that rose from the deepest place inside me. The abandonment hurt me, daughter. It hurt deeply, but life showed you what you needed to learn. Those words didn't come from anger. They didn't come from judgment. They came from truth. Raw, hard, necessary truth. They came from a spiritual understanding that life's falls teach what pride can't reach. They came from a place only those who have lived through it know. Destiny charges, but it also heals. She cried harder, cried like a child, cried as someone who swallows years of guilt in a matter of seconds, cried like someone finally facing the root of her own pain. And when she tried to say something else, I didn't let her. I pulled her into me, pulled her tightly, intensely, with the kind of embrace she had denied herself for so long. And there, in that narrow hallway, in that quiet nursing home, I held my daughter as if the world were ending, as if time had frozen, as if we had both traveled back to the beginning. She completely broke apart in my arms, and I held her the same way I always had, as if she were still that frightened little girl running into my embrace. Comment, hugs heal, to reinforce this moment. The rest of the world disappeared. Nurses stopped. Other elderly women looked. But nothing mattered. Nothing except that reunion that wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. It was emotional. It was ancestral. There, within that embrace, my daughter found a home she, herself, had destroyed. And I found the piece of her I had been missing throughout all the time I spent in that place. She whispered over and over, "I was wrong, Mom. I wronged you. I don't deserve your forgiveness." And I answered with the calm that only love understands. "It's not about deserving, daughter. It's about learning." And she understood. She understood that her abandonment didn't erase my love. She understood that the pain I felt didn't turn into bitterness. She understood that life gave back exactly what she had sown, to teach, not to destroy. And while she still cried against my chest, I felt a lightness enter me, a lightness I hadn't known in a long time, a lightness that didn't come from her return, but from the healing that began in that moment. When everything finally quieted inside me, when her crying had softened into exhausted breathing, I realized something it took a lifetime to learn. Abandonment doesn't define who I am. That door closing behind me, that nursing home gate echoing like a sentence, that cold hallway where I walked alone, none of it had the authority to determine the value of my story. That abandonment was a wound, yes, but not my end. I discovered that a woman is not the sum of what people do to her, but what she decides to do with what was done. I learned that a mother's love doesn't exist to erase pain. It exists to transform it. It teaches that dignity doesn't depend on recognition, that strength doesn't depend on applause, that character doesn't depend on anyone's gratitude. It reminds us that some forms of love only reveal their fullness after walking through darkness. My pain taught me patience. Silence taught me courage. Time taught me that what seems like loss is sometimes the beginning of a reconstruction we didn't know we needed. Life, with its firm hands and harsh ways of teaching, showed my daughter what her heart refused to see. It showed that absence collects its due. It showed that neglected love returns, like an echo. It showed that those who abandon will one day taste the flavor of their own abandonment, not out of revenge, but out of learning. Because life knows how to teach what pride tries to hide. Life corrects, cleans, turns everything inside out, but in the end, always reveals the truth. And the truth is simple. Nothing replaces a mother. When my daughter fell to her knees before me, I understood that some lessons don't arrive through words. They arrive through pain, through the fall, through the loss that could have been avoided. And I, even wounded, even marked by abandonment, knew that forgiving wasn't about approving. It was about freeing. Forgiving meant giving myself back the peace she almost took from me. Forgiving was choosing to live lightly. Forgiving was letting life continue with all its corrections and revelations, without allowing the past to hold me hostage. Today, looking at everything that happened, I leave you with the reflection I keep close to my heart. Abandonment can wound a woman, but it does not diminish her. Pain can hurt, but it does not define her. Silence can ache, but it also matures. Love can be mistreated, but it never stops being love. And life? Oh, life. Life always finds a way to teach what the heart refuses to hear. Take a deep breath with me. Let this story settle exactly where it needs to settle inside you. And before you go, allow me to remind you of something important. Your journey does not end here. The next video that's appearing on your screen now brings another truth from the matriarchs, another experience that brings light to the shadows so many women carry. It is not a continuation of this story. It is another flame, another revelation, another strength that deserves to be heard. Go, click, and continue this journey with me. The wisdom of the matriarchs still has so much to show you.